right, we are set.
We'll call to order the regular meeting of the Design Review Subcommittee, Wednesday, April 27th, Design Review Subcommittee meeting. We have one set of minutes to approve. Scott, did you get a chance to review the minutes? Do you want to make a motion?
Just a second here.
This is minutes of March 23rd, 2022.
I don't think I have minutes in my.
Oh, here, I can let you.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'll go ahead and make a motion while you're looking at it. I'll make a motion, we approve the minutes of the regular meeting of the Design Review Subcommittee, March 23rd, 2020. Do we have a second in a moment?
Sorry about that.
On this one, we established the time of the meetings, and it was unanimous. The Los Polinas guidelines, we in general got down to they were going to be relatively intentionally vague, but show the intent.
I second the motion.
Okay, we'll take a vote. Commissioner McCann?
Aye.
Commissioner Crandall is an aye, and we have one absent. We have no items for architectural review. We have one new business, and rather than doing that the regular way, we'll just open it up for a roundtable discussion and address it.
Great. Thank you, Chair Crandall. So what we're looking at today is a specific example. This committee previously reviewed some guidelines for outdoor dining or parklets, and that then went through Planning Commission and Council review, and an ordinance was adopted in March of this year. And the language within that zoning amendment included a provision that if there was a request for a parklet or dining deck that did not meet the standard version, then that would come by or come through design review for comment, and the city engineer would take into account comments from design review in determining whether or not to approve that deck, or whether it should be located in a different location, or whatever the comments may be from this body. So this item really is more of a charrette opportunity for the committee to provide their comments on potential locations or alternatives to what has been proposed. So this is for Avila's restaurant, which is right at the intersection of Bola Vista and Avenida Del Mar.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, of course.
Is this a specific proposal that you received,
So this
or a request, or are you guys kind of just talking generically?
So I did receive a request
Uh-huh.
from Avila's, and so their request is to use the standard layout that has been approved. So that's the 40-foot parallel parking layout. However, there's a couple of things within the new code section that would push them into requiring this review. And so one of those is the proximity to a trolley drop-off.
Okay.
Another is the proximity to the intersection at Bola Vista and Del Mar. They have to be at least 10 feet away from that. And then the third is that they are adjacent to a red curb. OCFA has previously approved a deck in this location at the dimensions that they had previously. So
You say OCFA?
OCFA had reviewed this before, so I feel pretty confident that they would be amenable to that. However, all of that taken into account, this is what we would consider a non-standard deck that does need to go through this group for review.
Okay, yeah. The only reason for the red curb is line of sight and trolley stop?
Yes, that I know of, unless OCFA has additional restrictions on there.
So we don't know yet if OCFA has, because I don't know if we have another corner that's that big a red, well, maybe in front of, is Hobie's another stop going the other way?
Hobie's is a turnout, and it has a parallel parking stall in front of it, and so I don't know if that was
Because going
done.
north, or east, west, what would that be? East, I guess.
I don't recall if that's another trolley stop right there.
On the other side,
On the
okay.
other side. Do you remember that? Northbound? I know. It's the
Yeah, I believe there is a trolley stop there by Hobie. There's a bench, and yes, there's a sign. So that
Is
is
there?
another
Okay.
location for a
Okay.
trolley.
Okay. I'm looking at
And that's right here as
two views here,
So let me, sorry.
and they're a little different. What's the difference
I'm
between
gonna
the two?
rewind just real quick. So this is what was submitted by the restaurant for the
Okay.
location. And in response, a very quick response I had not discussed yet with Public Works, I sent the other exhibits. So let me explain quickly. The one that they sent, they show that at minimum 10-foot gap from the intersection that's required. They're showing a 15-foot gap. However, I did notify them that the city would prefer to resume trolleys stopping at this location. During COVID, they were not stopping at this location. They continued on to the bulb out further down the street and stopped in the middle of the road, stopping traffic, and people would use that crosswalk.
Down
essentially
by
to
what the
load.
lot? No, by the community center down there. Okay.
And so with that being said, the 15 feet that they're proposing would not work for
Inadequate.
the trolley to
Right.
stop there at that location. I did ask our maintenance team to grab a measurement for me. The trolleys are 30 feet long. So now if you look at that first exhibit, that smaller blue arrow is approximately to scale of what 30 feet is from that crosswalk. And the larger blue arrow shows a measurement that's about 65 feet from the intersection to the edge of the ADA loading zone. So those are the two dimensions that are shown there. I'm sensing a question.
How can you tell? You're psychic. So there's a bus pad here, so I assume there's an OCTA bus stop there as well.
There's actually not an OCTA stop there.
Well, there probably used to
There
be.
may have been in the past.
Okay. I'm wondering maybe that's why there's so much red curb there, but
Yeah, similar to on Avenida Victoria and Pier Bowl where you have some of those restaurants. We
Right.
now have a lift stop, but there's no longer a bus stop, and that was for definitely an OCTA stop in the past.
okay. Sorry for the interruption.
No, not at all. And one other consideration, I know that I'm just putting a lot of information out there for you to digest, but I did hear from that the other three restaurants immediately down block of this location do plan to participate as well.
You're
So
talking
that would
Beach
be
Fire.
Beach Fire, Moncut Thai, and SC Wine Company. So there's 4 within this stretch that are interested in participating. So the 2 exhibits there were a very quick, perhaps we look at consolidating those into 2 blocks because the council does, in the final guidelines, we do require there to be a gap in between every 2 parklets. You can have 2 that are side by side, but then there needs to be a gap. So within this stretch, that also needs to be taken into consideration. And then the lower image, I think that while they're showing the standard parallel parking, given that it is that right-hand turn condition and a roundabout, it may make sense to also angle in that edge of the deck. That was just again, back of napkin, obviously, thought. So
Yeah, because obviously, I mean, like the trolley needs a little bit of maneuvering room.
to
Just
pull out.
even just cutting off that corner like that would help a bunch, I'm sure.
And that was the thinking. The measurement, I'm sure, is not accurate, but that was my thinking. Yes, the trolley would be able to pull out if it was angled in that way.
Did you scale that off yourself? I mean, me and Kyle both pasted off yesterday, and we were getting quite a bit further.
So this was from Google. From when we're looking at Google Earth, if I use the Google Earth measurement and grab from the white line, essentially to that first tree, the white line to the tree is right at about 30 feet.
Do we know how wide from the curb to how wide this is?
It's 10 feet.
They're showing 10.
That's all that's left? Because it's a wider sidewalk, but I don't think it's 10 feet wider than the rest of it. It only seems like it's big enough for those that electrical equipment and all,
So normal angled parking is 20-foot depth,
right?
perpendicular. So I think what you're saying is it really bumped out half of that? That's a good question. Because that was one of our engineering concerns too, is if to try to squeeze in planters along that area too, that we're squeezing that all within this narrow straight here. So if it is only 10 feet, and then we have
They
that
might be
requirement
able
for
to
the-
get some.
I don't think it's I don't think it's 10 feet. I mean, it's not 20 feet, but I don't think it's 10 feet either. On the diagonal parking, I would be shocked if it could, because I mean, a regular parking space is like 8 feet wide, right? And that's parallel.
and that's parallel, right?
So I would be shocked if it was, it's not 10 feet, but it's,
But these stalls could also be designed at 16 and a half because they're overhang potentially,
okay.
just due to the nature of, and I
Right.
don't know off the if I had our GIS open, I could kind of measure these a little bit.
So to make it meet engineering, we want to be at least 10 from the crosswalk. Is that correct?
The Kyle, our public works director, city engineer, he was not a fan of keeping it right up to the crosswalk line
Okay.
and only giving it that very little bit. So he's a fan of more pushing it towards where the radius of the curb ends and the straight curb ends, which would be on the below drawing, a good 8 to 10 feet west of the crosswalk. And then the 30 feet would start from there. And then you're right, you would need some sort of wiggle room for the bus to head out into traffic. We do not want the bus or trolley to be backing up towards a crosswalk.
Right.
Under no circumstances would we want that. So therefore, it needs some room to wiggle out and start angling out in front of it too. So 30 feet for the trolley, plus at least 10 in front of it to wiggle out. Kyle and I's measurement in the field still left a little bit of room in front of Avia's before it got to the ADA landing zone, but not much. It was a triangle plus a little bit there. So I don't see, if you could still squeeze in the planters that are required for the parking, planter bollards that were required in our parklets, we didn't see much more than a table of 4 there almost in front of Avia's.
Now, what's between Mongatai and Beachfire? That's
Maybe a little boutique shop.
that's retail, right?
I kind of think so.
Because we're going to have probably another problem down further by the Belgian place,
So, sorry,
because that's at the bulb out with the park and whatnot. So what I'm looking at is, I'm looking at, if we go 10 and then we're thinking 40 to 45, so from the sidewalk, if that's coming over, that's somewhere, it's starting to pass, it hasn't passed, I don't think, the end of Beachfire.
Our field measurements took it pretty close to the border between Beachfire and
Okay, and the sidewalk there is still wide.
correct.
So it's possible that they could get in your guidelines, we had something that if it was going to take a handicap space, that there would be a cost of relocating, which is going to require a ramp,
so whatever.
which
the costs
could
are-
be, if it's done right, pavement rather than a curb cut.
If
Can we, I mean, it obviously comes out a long ways, but
Asphalt? Is that what-
Oh,
Yeah.
so extending it into the landing zone?
yeah,
Technically, I believe that was outlawed a
okay,
decade back.
just wondering.
You still see it on buildings built in the 90s, though. So I was told that in parking lots and stuff, you cannot have the ramp in the loading zone.
Because for discussion purposes only at this point,
Even on this one.
right now the sidewalk is wider at Avila's, but it's filled up with mechanical equipment and trees. So if it were to start at a point, making this as short as we're comfortable with for engineering, and take up the stalls for it and beach fire, putting them together, putting more stalls here and here. One obviously is going to have to be handicapped to replace that one. Or would they be able to put a handicap over here on Ola Vista?
So, real quick, see the blue arrow going across? In this right here. This was what I thought could be an option right there. Is if you relocate across the street, there's already an ADA, and I know this image there doesn't capture it, but there's an ADA spot in front of Cotton's. And to the right of that ADA spot is the landing zone, and then there's another standard spot. So my thinking was potentially we just convert that standard spot, because then no new ramp would necessarily be needed. They could share the loading zone.
Yeah, I was almost thinking that if we, since this is a wider sidewalk here, if they can use a little of that sidewalk also to be deeper, we could keep our bus stop, put beach fire and Avalanche here, have the gap, and then rather than having these, this looks like two restaurants.
It is, yeah, that's shown. And those are adjacent, by the way. Moncut and SC Wine are side by
We
side.
could move it over one, I suppose, to get some parking in here, and we'd satisfy everybody. The other thought is do what they did across the street and take it down Ola Vista, and let them use the parallel rule for parking. Excuse me, for dining, which I think serves the public better. Not necessarily the restaurant as much, but it certainly serves the public having their normal bus stop.
I'm not sure that Ola Vista's wide enough in that location.
Well, it's got
Initially,
parallel
that was
parking.
it has parallel parking, but remember what this policy requires a planter bollard out there and room for those too. So the parallel parking is 8.5 feet. Maybe they can come into that travel lane a little bit more.
Now, the one we're using down in Pier Bowl, those are only 8.5, correct?
That we're extending it
And it's
out.
a different guideline for the parallels. Second page. Yeah, doing alternate A, they don't obviously get the whole 10 there, because for the table, they don't need the full 10. And they get that kind of an arrangement down Ola Vista.
So, which this arrangement in A could have, the chairs would have to be turned 90 degrees because the chairs right here would be going into that active sidewalk. So that was something we looked at
Good.
originally. 'Cause that's
Good thought.
assuming a wide sidewalk that has that little extra room for somebody to get in and out. And so there is some potential conflicts there.
The way to do that would be to use like a bench seating along the fence.
Right.
Table can move in.
Just to get
So
it
it's
in a little
fixed
bit.
seating basically along one side of it.
And then that
Or
would
they
be-
turn them to 90 degrees. But that's another option.
Right.
Bring it around, because then they can serve it with the same outdoor dining servers that they're using for their interior patio to that, behind it. So they've got a ton of patio dining then. I know it's not as nice as what they had before, but, we lost a bus stop.
Yeah, and one thing I'll note is there is another ADA that we're showing down here.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty sure you're aware that landing zone, it's on the wrong side, stuff like that. And so this, out of the 2 stalls that are on this block, the one that is in front of Avia's is the one that's very close to compliant. It's always been difficult to get compliant ADA stalls on Del Mar.
How many on their application? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So they were looking like for 18 seats. They don't say here, but 18 seats. And what did that parallel one say?
And I came up with very similar to what you're seeing here based on our field measurements, with just a tiny, small little triangle.
So that would be a hard one to serve.
It's interesting to combine it with the sidewalk in almost a modified approach, since the sidewalk is wide there.
Fudge onto the sidewalk a little bit.
I mean, we would have to kind of work with this ramp right here if the ADA stall stays here, because that concrete right there is the ramp to get out of this.
Because they've got the visibility. I mean, they can open all their windows to the sidewalk to give that outdoor dining feel. They could have them here and get the seats they want. And it'd be serviced by the same people that are serving their patio in the rear. Because we got to try to impact the rest of the public as little as possible. And the whole reason for doing this and losing parking was that the trolley is relieving some of the parking problems.
Correct.
And if we're taking away this and they're stopping way down here, that's a real tough inconvenience, particularly for seniors who may not be quite as mobile as many.
One of the pluses of having the trolley stop at the intersection, obviously you can use the intersection to head in too. So we don't lose that extra 15 feet of trying to get in and out on both sides of the trolley.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's why we located it in this location to begin with.
Yeah. And the fact it's a wider curb.
Right.
I mean, it's always been, that curb's always been there.
Well, the bulb outs came
because of all the equipment.
This is of interest to you.
That's Seal Beach owns that.
No, that's
Fabulous.
That's fabulous.
Yeah. And no bus stop at all.
Right.
And actually, it's blocking line of sight. And I have to admit, I ate there on that very patio. And enjoyed it.
From what I've heard too, there was some issues at the very beginning with their deck being too close to the intersection, just for trucks and vehicles making the right-hand turn. There was no reaction time available or anything like that. So.
And I will say the other thing it kind of solves is going down Ola Vista. They took that parking space away and made it for pickups.
The pickup.
Which, if the dining was there, they could kind of do double duty with, not officially,
The trolley stop.
with the trolley stop.
Which unofficially is probably what would happen.
That's what I mean. Yes.
Realistically, they're not supposed to do
Right.
other stalls that they've already done like that either, though. So it's a tough one.
Or if they were willing to drop 15, I've got 15 feet, 40 feet, they would have to drop 2 stalls. Let's see, here we go. 45 and 10, we were looking at 50 feet, which puts some right about here. And that handicap's the only legal one, so it really can't start till after it.
And it's tough to relocate that and make it less compliant somewhere else.
Mhm.
It opens the city up at that point.
Where are the next closest trolley stops?
Not until you get down by the community center.
Yeah, the library, yeah.
Yeah, so the Seville.
And the
So
only
it's
way,
top of the street here.
Correct,
in the
yeah.
library.
So Artifacts here and then Seville.
the only way to do it would be to put it on the other side, but then,
And you're making them walk further.
well, we're also incurring city expense by doing all that.
Are you talking about the trolley?
Yeah. I think I would make we're going to come across a few that aren't going to get what they want, unfortunately. And we don't want to do any permanent modifications.
So what was your idea with the bottom picture then of beach fires sounding like they're coming in too? Could they potentially do something to where they're sharing this one plus a little piece for them?
I do know that they want to have Avila's does not want to like share a deck for their
Insurance and everything.
insurance,
Yeah.
etc. concerns.
Or butt up to it?
Yeah, butt up would be fine. This image here, I'm gathering is like way, so, again, back of napkin, way too short, way too close to the intersection from what I'm hearing from Public Works and from design reviews. So I'd have to move over significantly. So from what I'm hearing, the most feasible option, if there were to be any option on Del Mar, probably would entail that a consideration of relocating the ADA. And if there's not an option for relocating the ADA, then their only option would be Ola Vista.
That's my gut reaction on this one. And so we would almost need, to talk to our attorney is of whether we can take an ADA that's in front of businesses that it serves and tell them you got to park across the street. Usually ADA has to be the
Yeah,
closest.
somebody's going to say, that
It has to be the closest.
I want to be closer to that business, and the court's going to decide, and we're going to lose.
Exactly.
I mean, that's the way it works.
It's a tough one because it's supposed to be the closest stall to the front door, right?
Mhm.
And most of these businesses don't have parking lots, so therefore that's why the ADA the city picked, 2 per section and tried to space them out every 10 to 20 stalls to have an ADA stall. Due to topography of the street, it's very difficult to make a hill flat. So we have some interesting layouts.
Well, the only other thing I can see that might satisfy them, but probably not, is now that we've got the wide sidewalk for a little bit. Could they have some 2 set tables right up against the building face? Putting the pedestrians around the outside, closer to the curb.
I don't think so, because I think most of that furniture and stuff is closer to the curb.
They also have the vertical post. They're the only property in town with a vertical post that
Okay,
Comes down.
okay, how about that?
engineering's not a fan of.
What's a vertical post?
So they have columns from their overhang.
Oh,
So they're the only property in town that got.
so they have structural support out in the public right of way for their structure?
Yeah, they
Oh,
got
that's interesting.
Yeah, all the others are cantilevered. I say across the street, but I think those are on private.
Those are
clearly
private property. Exactly.
So coming back real quick to this, just one other. I don't know the answer to this, but I do know that they have parking, and they do have like as part of their property. They might.
They got a parking structure behind them.
Yeah, and this spot is clearly in front of this building, so this
Interesting.
building might provide their own ADA. I don't know if that would change things, but just throwing that out for sake of discussion.
Okay. And I think Scott,
this is a driveway.
I was talking to Zach a little bit, trying to come in and S in the trolley afterward is gonna take a lot more distance
Yeah,
for the SEN parking and then trying to get out. So the corner is the best place for it. And our big sales pitch has always been the trolley has to be efficient enough to replace the lost parking. So if we eliminate a stop, we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot.
It's definitely one of the toughest sites to, I think their Ola Vista front, having Ola Vista frontage is the other alternative to look at. Unless this is all pushed and somehow it's tough to push everybody ADA to here when it was here. So that the guy driving down the street
Yeah.
who mails out lawsuits is going to say there used to be one here, where'd it go?
I think something to put in the back of your mind for later is, assuming this sunsets and goes away at the end of next year, can we add a couple more parking spaces there in that red curve area?
Not
Trolley's gonna run no matter whether we have the,
Yeah, but the trolley doesn't need all that space.
pretty close to it.
It needs pretty close. Our measurements kind of, I don't know if my pin, but kind of where Bart, my measurement out in the field was about
Oh,
to here.
okay.
I mean, maybe you can do something like that, but
Okay, that's pretty far then.
at least that's what we were measuring out there. The narrowness of it too, you'd go into that sidewalk a little bit. So if we did do that, obviously this ADA stall would get modified, but the sidewalk would have to come in. 'Cause
Okay,
remember,
so
you
it's
don't
not-
have that full 20
There's not a
feet.
big bonanza there of space.
Yeah.
And across the street, Jonathan, they came down Old Vista and it worked, correct?
They did, and that is going to be where they propose to go.
So I don't think it's an unreasonable request that they both kind of approach it the same way. Because this is an engineering rather than an aesthetic problem.
It's dimensions, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, even if this wasn't a trolley, there might be some concerns on the long term of 15 feet even, of that reaction time of somebody turning right. Because you're in a downtown area. Kyle and I both thought the same thing. This person's looking for pedestrians. He's looking left, he's looking right. He's usually not going to be looking down here for a deck. If he's
Yeah, I
not
mean,
looking
really,
at
it almost needs the
Especially after
bulb out.
in the dusk, in the evening, or the sun's setting and stuff like that. It's a tough reaction period if you don't know the area. So my understanding is the previous public works director had this deck moved when it was put in temporarily too close to the intersection due to that reason.
We don't have a computer hooked up to the screen. So we got beach fire. So they'd want to take 1, 2, 3. There's a gap. Let's see here. Beach fire. There's no gap. So really there'd be a gap in here probably. Doesn't have to be because we can go 6.
You can have up to 6 spaces consecutive.
And when we get down here, we've got the bulb out, right? And the bench and all.
And this is right past this screen right here. This is a driveway into private property.
Oh, that's right.
So that's why that ADA is probably put there, just because
Yeah,
it was
put
a
backwards.
wasted space of the triangle, so they just kind of squeezed it in.
And then for ramping, the people are supposed to go in the drive approach.
Yeah.
Now, we've got a couple of businesses off that patio. And is their parking part of that main building in the parking structure? Do they have some in there? Or is just the restaurant get parking in there? I would guess it has to be the patio. It's all one building.
Yeah, most of it is open parking. There's a couple of designated spots. I think there's an office use or some.
I believe
At
there's
the
office
rear
use
end?
in the rear behind up in there.
So
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
couple designated spots for the office use. The retail and restaurant are just open.
Nothing designated, right? Okay.
And it doesn't serve beach fire.
I think engineering trumps
Like this.
aesthetics on this one,
Well, especially the way Cotton's already has it on Ola Vista too.
and prove that it does work.
Yeah,
And we might be a little bit, what should I say, generous on the amount of landscaping a little bit, if they are a little narrow to make up for it. That sidewalk's
Sidewalks.
a little narrow, but not bad.
It's 4 feet at least. I don't remember it being much more than that. That Ola Vista
That
is
size?
probably only a 5 foot right of way, so it might be 4.5 feet of sidewalk.
Okay.
It just might mean rotating the tables versus that other alternative.
Yeah.
Engineering's not concerned of the removal of landscaping, but we would like to keep the planter bollards there from a safety standpoint. So
Because I know that drop
they can-
off is the center of town.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the one you get off if you want to go either direction.
Mhm.
Probably not what you wanted to hear, but
I'm glad I don't have to make a decision.
but that would be my recommendation to management, that they explore that as
Okay.
the option. And I agree with Zach on his engineering analysis on it.
It's a tough one.
Directed.
I agree.
Okay.
And you can say that, thoroughly considered all options, and we want to say yes, this is how we say yes.
Yeah. No, I think this is serving its purpose. There were other community members that were concerned about this location previously. And this mechanism does, as I just kind of mentioned, unburden an individual staff person from carrying that. So it's good to
Yeah,
have
no,
the
we
round
don't
table.
mind taking the heat.
You did bring up before, Bart, the ADA. I don't think I answered on Ola Vista. Can it be shifted over there? I don't think you can in a parallel
Yeah,
parking
it doesn't
without
work.
a landing. And so
No,
I've seen
you're
it done
absolutely
on a
right.
private street before, where somebody customized their sidewalk to make it a landing zone.
I have seen that in Newport. I have seen some parallel without ramps in Newport where they're just giving someone like closer access to something, but there's no.
It's
It's not
It's,
compliant.
it's
clearly not
similar to this
compliant.
guy where
Yeah.
all of a sudden the guy's having to, he's having to deal with a 13%
And
rate,
I-
which is,
Do know that one-time ride in trolley, it's got to be handicap also. They've got a rack for the,
one of our main concerns was stopping.
so
on the street.
if, yeah. So I think that's the approach for this particular application. And they've been so nice to work with. I mean, Owls is, they've come to all our meetings when we were coming up with these guidelines and all, and saying, they were fine with 16 tables, so if they only get 12, I think they're still going to be happy. You might, that's one of the nicest buildings on that thing. Now, what about the new restaurant? Do you think they're going to try that, or are they going to wait? I don't know why they bother. They've got so many dang seats in that place that.
I don't.
226.
Yeah,
I doubt. I don't know that they'll be done in time to make
yeah.
that.
I don't think it's worth their time.
They don't really have that much frontage either. This is kind of.
No, it's a narrow building.
Yeah.
40-foot lot, so they just had to have their parking behind them. So
And they squeezed that in. But they got it. Made it work. Okay, can we give you anything more on this?
No, I hear the recommendation. So, and Zach can relay that since ultimately we will have Kyle as kind of the decision body. So how I'll proceed is explain to the applicant in this instance that their option would be Ola Vista, and they can resubmit with a proposal at that location.
are we open to that potential of them using this tiny triangle though? If they wanted to put in, if they could squeeze in a 6-person table in that area. That's the one issue we didn't kind of follow up on.
Yeah.
It may be too small to make it worth their while.
True.
Um,
It's up, maybe is it up to them to at least pursue that if they were to want to?
And I mean, personally, if I was to want outdoor dining, I'd go to the back patio, use
Right.
those tables, because I don't want to be next to the cars going in and out, so,
This one was tight. It was,
yeah.
and I will say, me and Kyle are 99% on the same page. He was measuring from the beginning of the concrete, basically. And so just to be able to get that bus, is he always going to stop perfectly on that back line? No. It's just he needs that room to be there and then to be able to go forward.
Mhm.
And definitely didn't, with that fear of not having to back up. There's just no way we
Yeah.
want the trolley backing up.
I think
Into a crosswalk.
aesthetically, it'd be fine there, but engineering-wise, that trumps everything.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Next item for old business. Beach Deli.
Beach Uptown.
They got their, I guess, their certificate of occupancy because they've opened.
Did you
Is
guys-
it a temporary?
Let's see. I don't know. I don't know that they've been issued a temporary certificate of occupancy. They do have so their outstanding item is on the planning side is landscape. They just got their landscape review finalized by Pat Murphy. a couple
Because
of
we
days
still have the
ago.
roof. And that's why I was thinking the only leverage, if we give them their certificate of occupancy, they didn't stack the roof per the design guidelines with the cement and overlay and all.
Where are we talking about?
Beach Deli, right north beach.
Okay.
So they
And
did.
it's in their plans, it's on their conditions of approval that they're gonna do it. But once we give a certificate of occupancy, our leverage goes way down. So check and see if it's just a temporary certificate of occupancy to operate. And it could be predicated that, you're not gonna be able to keep going
Have you been by the building recently? 'Cause
on the
they-
way here.
On the way here, because they did add mortar to the first row of.
Didn't even see that, I was looking.
Okay.
They've got bird stop in there, but I didn't see any packing. But it's gotta be random stacked. And that's not me making it up, it's a gateway, it's a historic district, and we made Starbucks and McDonald's and all those guys do it, and so they're in the same, we didn't make them. The rules make them,
The
the
rules
guidelines,
made them,
yeah.
right.
I'll check on
So
that.
check on
status.
that, and what was another one?
Handles. I want to talk about handles.
Okay, on the bowling alley. Are they restoring any of the old trusses for the bowling alley?
Yes, they did have.
I noticed they haven't rolled them up there, so I'm wondering, are they trying to say they aren't?
Yeah, so they
Safe.
did have an engineer on site. Actually, when I was doing a site inspection, they had an engineer there who was stress testing the ones that were saved. And I do know that I believe it was one, maybe two of them did not pass the structural stress test. And as far as I know, the rest did. So there are a couple that will have to be replaced in kind that did not pass the test, and the others
Okay.
would be used.
This is all part of the Secretary of Interior Standards for Historic Preservation,
Wow.
that you use as much of the old building as possible. And if they don't use those trusses, they've used nothing from the old building.
Yeah, essentially nothing.
So
Could they use them for cosmetic purposes, even if they don't fail?
I think I've seen
Yeah.
ones where they do displays
Still put
in the
them down
lobbies
there?
and things, but there's not much room to do that.
Well, and I think what Zach's referencing is even having like an I-beam on either side that supports that. So it's not necessarily a part of the structure, but is like supported and
Look
visible.
like it is.
Right.
Yeah, I think that would be. I mean, they would need to come back and modify their plans, but otherwise, update on that project. Staff approved their tenant improvement plans for the theater. We actually approved the bowling alley plans back in October.
So one of the original plans they showed us with the,
Modified since
Okay.
then, so there's no longer any events on El Camino Real.
good,
And so that was approved actually back in October, November timeframe, but the architect failed.
but you said for the
to-
theater.
So that's for the bowling alley.
Yeah.
The bowling alley had a shell permitted a long time ago. And OCFA signed off on the
Right.
preliminary review because they don't require architectural plans for a shell. But the TI plan, they do have to have the architectural plans that are approved by OCFA. The city approved their plans in the fall, but the architect did not submit what was required by OCFA and still has not gotten the tenant improvement plan
Okay.
approved by OCFA. They several months later submitted the TI for the theater. I had a number of recommendations for changes on that one. I did meet them in the field and reviewed with their contractor a number of different things, getting into, for instance, tile and what could be
Yep.
saved and what could not. And they made modifications to those plans, and those were approved last week.
Cool.
But again, OCFA, and I did follow up with them to say, again, the city has not been the timeline issue. It's been your interaction with OCFA. They have not yet submitted that set to OCFA
Okay.
either. So that's the current status there.
So are they going to be the operators of it, or do they have a tenant to operate that?
They have a tenant, Wedgwood Weddings, and this is also
That's the group that has the golf course clubhouse.
they do.
Real favorite of some people.
Yeah, they do. I've had to have an interaction with Wedgwood as well because they began advertising an element of the property that was not approved. So to be clear, that they would have to return to Planning Commission to request that modification. So there were some renderings that they had posted that showed the pergola in the patio area for the bowling alley
Mm-hmm.
as having a solid roof instead of being a pergola and like a wedding ceremony occurring in that space.
Back to that thought, okay.
Yeah, so
Because they redid that whole patio. There was a wedding space originally,
mhm.
and everything kind of focused on it. Okay.
And you know, my a couple of issues here. One, you're changing the design, and that isn't something that staff would be comfortable saying is substantially conforms to the plans. And then two, the use, right? Like this was now there's more tenants, and that's going to be used daily by a number of food uses. How are you going to troop in a bride and a groom and provide
keep everything else
accessibility and provide accessibility to that roof space that's disconnected from everything else while people are eating below you and traffic is going by? So there's a number of things that aren't addressed that would have to be.
And we didn't think about it, but also pickup food. A lot of those are going to be fast food and do a lot of pickup, and I don't know what we do with the parking. That's something to, in your spare time, Zach, take a look at that. And, we're going to have to accommodate it somehow. Either the parallel parking along that street should be,
That could be an option.
10 minutes for maybe 4 stalls or
Almost
something.
green curve
Short.
that entire alleyway.
Red right now, or the alley or Desesha or the.
I'm thinking of the
shakeout.
alley that goes right
Okay,
adjacent to it.
because I believe we're red on El Camino Real.
They are.
bridge.
So that would be an option. You wanted to talk about?
Handles.
Okay, handles.
So I was like really confident that we, outside of their kind of walk-up window, there's 3 parking spaces. And I was super confident that we talked about curbing that off, eliminating those 3 spaces, maybe having parallel spaces to create a bigger
There
kind
was a
of
long discussion on that.
kind
yeah.
of a courtyard there, because there was going to be queuing and waiting and kids running around. And I went by there and there's the 3 spaces.
So
I
yeah,
remember that.
well the end that was a recommendation from design review
Okay.
that I was supportive of that as well in pursuing that. But coming from that wasn't a condition of approval. And one of the challenges with that whole property is that Stater Brothers, who was not a part of that application
At the
and
time,
discussion, their lease gives them veto power over changes to any of the common areas in the property. So from that hearing where we discussed that, the property owner had to go and discuss that plan and get approval from Stater Brothers for that to be implemented. So how that was carried forward was more of business owner, and they wanted this as well. We support you, and if you change this, you're not going to have to come back to a hearing to have that change. But we are similar to the wall that separates those 2 plazas
Yeah,
at the mercy of Stater Brothers in that
The
instance.
connection between the 2 shopping centers.
Right, I
isn't it?
remember that.
And-
Stadiums.
And Brixmore did approach them and were told that,
They-
you know, essentially no on reducing the parking count for the
I
area.
kind of do remember we said, this is what we'd like to see if you could do it. So
Yeah.
apparently they determined they couldn't do it.
That's correct.
Yeah, as I recall, we said we would prefer this. You guys go back and look at the overall count of the whole thing. If they have 3 spaces to give, let's do this.
And they kind of liked the idea because it gave them more patio too, or more pedestrian area. So they would have
Yeah, that's too bad.
done it if they
I
could.
thought it would have been a lot better.
So that's something that for planning in the future, if they get a different if there's different management at Stater and they come back, then we wouldn't need to go back to a hearing. To
Just
make
tell
that change.
Staters when they come in and want
Oh, I
something.
know. Believe me.
They haven't been doing
They have
a whole lot.
They have no good graces at the city right now.
For what they're getting for steaks. They ought to be real happy. Okay, and let's see.
Does Stater sell them that site? The Handle site?
No,
No, I guess it would have been the.
the Staters is still a tenant.
They're
They don't
long-term
own
tenant.
anything, but their long-term lease has very.
Seems
Clear
like the tail's
provisions.
wagging the dog here a little bit.
It is, and this isn't the only location where that's happened. So a good example, Laguna Hills Mall. Part of why that massive redevelopment stalled is
Right.
because a couple of the anchor tenants there had the same provisions that they had to sign off on changes to the site before they could be implemented, and especially anchor tenants that are going out of business have used that as a business model. So Sears, JCPenney, well, they're not in the room, they're not gonna sue me. They use it for extortion, really, is to say,
It's legal extortion.
yeah, give
That's
us,
$5 million.
yeah, give us
and
$5-10 million
We
dollars.
call
we'll
that-
let you improve property.
Take it out.
We'll let
What
you do
Johnny Depp's leverage.
leverage.
A little leverage.
Yes.
We'll make sure we get that.
I know, maybe delete that last.
And the art project is going. They've got it all fenced in, so they've got drawings in, I guess, and got their.
It's all building on that one. I got
Yeah.
no grading plans or anything. So he's got to
Oh.
keep that parking lot the
North
same or it
Beach.
turns into a grading plan.
Yeah, that's why I was wondering.
I was thinking mural or.
No,
I
I'm sorry.
understand the art
No, the
building.
old
Historic, yeah.
art supply building.
So
Uh,
that's another one that was all building department, but yet if they rip up the whole parking lot, it'll turn into a grading plan. It'll turn into
There
a
was
water
some-
priority
there was some
project, it'll turn into all
engineering,
those things.
That affects the sidewalk and whatnot.
They're relaying out the parking lots. We approved that, but probably ADA access around the drive approaches and stuff like that. I think we did that. So
But
there really
the
wasn't-
undergrounds are going to have everything's going to be catered. They don't have. Did they have a full kitchen? No, I don't think they did. They just had a catering kitchen.
I don't recall the kitchen setup
Yeah.
there.
Okay. So look, some activity going on. It's looking that north end of town has got a lot going on right at the moment.
A few new businesses as well. I know we've had a few ribbon cuttings up in that area, and the North Beach Association recently started meeting again, and the planning division's work on the West Pico corridor has kind of gotten that group to start meeting and getting more involved as well. So yeah, I think there's a lot of.
And Los Molinos is active, so
Have you
that's,
been by there?
The brewery, yeah. Haven't been by.
and I don't know if you've been by, but the In-N-Out's got they were pulling their forms and getting their slabs
Yeah,
all
so
squared
there's,
away.
yeah.
Yeah,
So all the underground should be done, and
getting going.
keep thinking the lines to that thing when it first opens, it's going to raise some eyebrows.
We were told that's
Back
the
up.
longest queue in and out, like in and out at all. And so with our option of the whole queue and then a condition that says a person will be standing out here and if it starts
Yep.
getting in the street, he's going to close that drive approach and snake them through their own property for an
Yeah,
additional
stay on the. Center.
about 10 cars on site. So if I remember correctly,
They'll be backed up all the way to
I think
Del
Del
that
Taco.
I think that would be
Yeah.
37 cars. I don't put it in minutes, but I think it's 37 cars all
Yeah.
the way.
Would you
Should
like
I
to
just
talk about
accidentally
while you wait
delete
for
the
your
whole
burger?
thing?
I mean,
Because
at that point,
it's
I just go through the line twice because by the time I get through it, I'm going to be hungry.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
And
Fast pass.
the amount of residential grading plans and projects, which isn't a big, thing, because grading doesn't always get triggered, but those numbers are up there too. So people have the money and are spending it and keeping us busy.
And one in San Juan, up there, La Plata and Ortega, does a gangbuster business.
Yep.
Got in and out.
Yeah, gangbuster. Okay, so new business is done. Do we have any old business, which we kind of included there? Oral and written communications, none. We have an adjournment here
I move we adjourn
to, I don't know when.
to Wednesday, May 11th, 3 p.m.
Yeah, that was what we voted on, so
Did we? Oh.
I guess the minutes have been submitted to, or will be submitted to council. I think I just signed them.
Okay.
So, yeah, by the time that meeting occurs, it'll be 3 p.m.
Okay. I'm glad.
I second the motion. Vote.
Aye.
McCann, aye, and Crandall, aye. So,
Thank you.
yeah, I see you're going to